In this video, we're going to be building our own custom React component library similar to Material UI and Chakra UI. This is the component architecture that we will be working with in this build. So essentially, we'll have a component library. This will have Jest, TypeScript, ESLint. It will also have Husky in there to do our pre-commit checks, and also we are going to be using conventional commits, which sets a commit message standard. So therefore, what we can do is utilize the package called standard version, and then that will create our changelog file. What will happen then, we will have an CI pipeline running with Circle CI. This is free, so essentially if you want to become a senior dev, then you need to know how to handle automation. So Circle CI is what we will handle our automation with. So we will run on there our linters, our builds, our tests, and also uploading our package up to npm over here. This will all be automated. We will get that all set up later on. But first of all, what we want to do is build our React component library. And then this will be using the module bundler called Rollup. And then what Rollup will do is it will have a dist file which will serve all of our files, and then Circle CI will handle the rest. Right, so what we want to do is first of all create our Git repository in here. So as you can see, I've created one. I'm just going to quickly copy this and then go into my terminal, go into the relevant folder that you want, and then in here all we need to do is run git clone. So git clone and then paste in what we've just copied. So now this will create the folder for us. So now all we need to do is ls, and then the folder we've named is the React component library over here. So all we need to do is cd into that and then do code space dot, and this will open a VS Code terminal up for us. So now let's go ahead and get started. So let me close everything down. And first of all, what we want to do is initialize the app with npm. So let's open a terminal. So new terminal in here. We want to first of all check the node version. So let's do node-v, and we need to change to node version 18. So we do this with mvm. So now let's clear our terminal and we want to run npm init. And now we'll get asked a few questions in here. So the first one is the package name. We already have that. The version I'm going to do as 0.01 because we're still developing it. Description is going to be, this is a React component library, and we can add some more description in there, but let's just keep it as that for now. We're going to have an entry point of index.js, but again, we will reconfigure everything in the app. And again, we've got the Git repository already, so we can keep that in. If you wanted to add any keywords, you can do, and the license, I'm just going to do MIT, and everything's okay. So let's just press yes. So now we'll have a package JSON file here, and it has all of our information in of what we need. We're going to delete this script for now. We don't need any scripts just yet, and we are going to get started with setting everything up. Now, the first thing what I want to do is install TypeScript. So let's go ahead and do that. So essentially, we will keep it simple. We will use npm in this build. So it will be everything as a dev dependency. So essentially, because it's a component library and not an app, when we ship to production and upload it to npm, all of the dependencies won't be needed. So we only need the dependencies as dev dependencies. So again, let's install TypeScript. So npm I -- save -dev and TypeScript, like so. And then now we need to initialize TypeScript. So Control R, and it's npx tsc init. So that's the best way to do it. So if you do Control R, if you use the command before, then what happens is it finds the command for you, and then you can essentially, whatever the command is, even if you forgot the command. So that's a handy tool to use. So npx tsc init, like that. And now this generates a TypeScript file for us. Now what I'm going to do is just bring in the file with all the configurations in, and then I'll explain them. So let me just quickly copy this across. So now here we've got compiler options, and it's got all of the comments in as well. So what I'm going to do is quickly just split it out. So this section here is the language and environment. The language and environment is ESNext, what we're going to be setting it as. So essentially the target specifies the version of ECMAScript. Now ESNext is the latest version, so as you can see here, we can see more information in here, but essentially we want the latest version of ECMAScript. And the ECMAScript version is basically what type of version our TypeScript code should compile to. So in our case, it's the latest version, and that is the first one. The second one is very important because we're using JSX in our React app. Essentially, this is saying that TypeScript should handle JSX within our React app as well. Then we move on to modules over here. Again, the latest version, which is ESLint for the modules, specify what module code is generated, and then the module resolution is Node. So basically we want to use the module resolution that is similar to the Node style, so that's why we choose Node in here. This one's quite self-explanatory. Allow.js is false. We only want to use TypeScript, so that's what we will be doing. This one's not important, but essentially it's basically saying how far deep into do you want to go into the node modules folder. So this is just one level deep, and again, this is important, but this part here is where we would need to essentially concentrate and focus on the most. So this is the section here, which is the emit. The first one of declaration of true, this is important because when we import the project or the library into our own projects, then we want to be able to access the types because TypeScript serves as the documentation. So this will generate the d.ts files. So when we have a types.ts, essentially this will then TypeScript will then transpile it into a definition file for us to consume in our app that we import this npm package into. This one only outputs the declaration files and not the JavaScript files. Source map of true because this helps with the debugging of the JavaScript code when it's transpiled. And then the directory that we want to put our build files into is going to be /dist, which we will look at later on. The declaration directory for our types for TypeScript is going to be in the types folder, and then that is that section there complete. There's more up here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it with you guys, and then you can essentially do your own research on it. But these are all the configurations that we need for us to be able to build with our library, and essentially these are the configurations we will be using. Last one actually is going to be skip lib check of true. So basically when we are doing our type checks, this lib check basically ignores the node modules folder. So therefore when we are doing our type checks, we're not looking in the node modules folder. It's not actually needed. That's why we ignore it. Again, we add our git ignore and ignore the node modules folder as well. So what I'm going to actually do is add a git ignore folder as well. And in here, we're just going to add the node modules because we want to actually ignore that. So let me just save everything. And now that is the first step complete. Essentially what we've done is we've installed TypeScript, and now we have initialized TypeScript in our project. So now if we go in here in dev dependencies, we have TypeScript installed in here. We also want peer dependencies. So let me just essentially add that in. And the peer dependency is basically that the other package that's using this library, they need this same dependency as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Node version, or the React version, should I say, of 16. So it's essentially, it has to be greater or equal to React version 16. So let me save that. So now we've got TypeScript set up. Let's go ahead and build some components. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and build a component and see how we handle everything in there. So we'll do that next. Right, so what we want to do now is we want to start creating our component. So I said let's create the button component, but what I'm actually going to do is create a page component. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our root directory here, I'm going to create a new folder. In here is going to be the source folder, and now this needs an index.ts file. So this is where we will export all of our components. So we need to create the component, then export it. So in source now, let's create a new folder called components, and in here we're going to create our first component. So the component we're going to create is going to be a page, and let's say this page takes in a title and some props. So now what we want to do is in this page folder, let's create a new file. This will be index.tsx, and in here all we want to do is rafce. This is a page component, and we want to pass in props. So this will take in title and children. So this is just normal React here what we're doing. So essentially now we receive them props, we need to pass in the type. So this is react.fc, and then we now need to pass in the type in here. So this will be page props. So now in the page folder, we've got the index.tsx here. So now we need to create a new file called types.ts. So we want to separate our concerns and our logic. So export type of page props takes in the title and the children. So we need to import react from react.node in here, but now you can see here it says cannot find namespace of react. And what we need to do now is we need to install all our files in package.json, because we did add the peer dependencies of react in here. But what I also want to do is install react and react DOM in our library over here, so we'll do that in a moment. So again, in here now we get a div, and this div, or we'll change this to a React fragment. And then in here, what we want to do is we want a h1, and in the h1 it's going to render the title, and also we want to have children. So any children that are wrapped in this page component is going to be in here. So essentially pass in the children. Now what we need to do is import page props from the relevant type, and then all that needs to be done is to install the relevant things that we need. And the good thing on why we're using TypeScript is because it's telling us where the errors are. So all we now need to do is essentially fix the errors. So all we need to do in our terminal is npm i --save -dev, and in here we want React, and we also want React DOM as well. So let's install them. And now these errors should go away because we've imported them in as dev dependencies. If they still are showing up like this, then what you need to do is restart your TypeScript server. So that will be Command Shift and P, and then you search for TypeScript restart Jest server. So let's click that, and now you can see there's errors still showing up. So what is happening here? If we go in our package.json, we now have React and React DOM showing, and also everything else is in here. But essentially what we'll do is close this down and save it, and then reopen it. So now if we hover over the error, if we go in here, you can see here it says could not find declaration module in for React. So we also need to add the types for React because we're using TypeScript. So let's add them in as well, and now you can see all of the errors have gone. So that is our component created. We've created it using the page component, and we also have types in a separate folder. What we will also do is add unit tests and Jest as well, just to make sure everything is working correctly, and when we pass in props and receive props, then also that is working correctly as well. So what we now want to do is be able to test this out. So let's go ahead and actually make our first Rollup bundle, and then we will be able to visualize and see what we are doing, and we will install Storybook after that. So the next thing we need to do is first of all look at the module bundler of Rollup, which is in the diagram that we looked at the beginning, and this is what bundles all of our files together. One last thing to do, we have this index.ts file over here. Now we need to export everything from the page index.tsx file here and then export it out over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So export, and then essentially what we want to export is the page. So it's going to be export default as page from component/page. If there was more in here, you would do export default as button from the button component, and so on. So essentially you're exporting each individual item, and then you are having the tree shaking functionality. So you don't basically need to import the entire library. You just need to import what you want to use, such as if I wanted to use the page component in my application, then I would do that, and the same with the button. So that's how you would do it, and then all of the logic for the component is handled in here. So let's go ahead and save all of this, and then what we're going to be looking at is Rollup as a module bundler next. Right, so now we've built our component. Essentially, when we want to ship the app to production or upload it to npm or wherever it is, we need something called a module bundler. Now, Rollup is specialized as a module bundler for creating UI libraries, such as this one we are creating. There are other module bundlers out there, such as the module bundler and also Webpack 5. But in this build, we will be focusing on Rollup. So if we go into the internet and essentially search for Rollup.js, if we click into it, now you can see here it says Rollup.js, the JavaScript module bundler, Essentially, it compiles all of your pieces of code in everywhere in your app, because in React everything is all separate and then it comes as one. Essentially what it does is it compiles it all into one file, and then that file is the truth of source, so to speak. So this all will bundle everything for our code into a dist folder, and then that dist folder is uploaded to npm. So essentially, if you want to look more on it, these are the features that Rollup offers. So you can see here, this is a good one, which is tree shaking, because like I mentioned before, we want to have our page component exported as the page. If we had a button component, then we could do the same there, and so on. So again, if you see it in action over here, all you need to do is click get started. Now there's quite a lot going on. You can install it globally and so on, but what we want to do is we want to install specific packages for our project. So if you wanted to read more on this, there's quite a lot of documentation here to look through. But what we want to do now is continue with the build, and we have a brief understanding of what Rollup is. So now let's go back in our project. What I'm actually going to do is install the packages that we need. So let's go ahead and import the relevant modules that we need and install them. So it's Rollup plugin node resolve, Rollup plugin TypeScript because we're using TypeScript, Rollup plugin common.js, Rollup plugin DTS, and Rollup plugin post CSS. So let's press enter on that, and now that will import all of the modules that we need. What we also need to do is create a new file now, and this is the rollup config file. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's rollup.config.module.js file, and press enter. And now what I'm going to do is bring in the imports that we need. So let me quickly import them in, and I'll explain them to you. So essentially resolve. So resolve here, if you hover over it, it says locate modules using node resolution algorithm. So again, we define this in the TypeScript tsconfig JSON file over there. And essentially it helps us find any modules in our node modules folder. The TypeScript one, if you hover over it, seamless integration between Rollup and TypeScript, so that's quite necessary why we need that one. CommonJS, convert CommonJS modules to ES6 so they can be included in the Rollup bundle. We need that. DTS is important as well. It says so. Essentially, what DTS is used to generate the definition files for TypeScript. So that's why we need that one. Post CSS, again, there's no information on this, but what essentially Post CSS does is it basically integrates Post CSS in your rollup. So essentially, you can style these components here, which we will do later on. And then this one over here basically inserts the package JSON file that we have over here. In here, we'll have our declaration files and type files. And then this last one is basically importing package JSON. And in there, what we will have is values such as the main value and also the module value. So we'll do that later on in the package JSON. But that's essentially what we need to do is we've installed everything and we need to import it in. So let's go ahead and create the rollup configuration object now. So essentially it's going to be export default, and then this is going to be an array. So in this object over here, this is basically the configuration of our rollup bundle itself. So let's go ahead and bundle the main library. So first of all, we need the input. So that is going to be the index.ts file over here. So let me just close this down. So essentially, this is the file that we need as the input, because this is what exports everything out for us. So let's first of all create an object. And in this object, it will take the input. And all we need to do is pass in the file path. So I think it's source slash index.ts, so this one over here. So that's the import, which is the essentially the entry point for the library. Then we need the output, so let's go ahead and do that. And the output, we're going to have two outputs. So because we're working with JSON objects, if we have two, we just need to wrap it in an array. And then the first object, so this is how we're going to bundle our code. And what it does, it creates the modules that we want. So essentially we want common.js, and we also want an ES module as well. So let me just quickly copy that from GitHub Copilot. And essentially what that does is it gets access to what we define in the main value, so package.json.main, and then this one is the package.json.module. So actually what we will do is we'll define them values whilst we're here. So in package.json we have the main. We need to change this now. So the main is going to be in the dist folder. So let's go in dist. This isn't created. This happens when we build the project. So when we run build, and that will be done by running the command of rollup, but we'll do that in a moment. So dist slash and then CJS. So as you can see in the rollup config, let me just do it side by side. Here, the output is CJS for the main, so we need to make sure the keywords match. So this.cjs is the format here, as you can see. And then this is just going to be index.js. Now you might be thinking, why is it JS and not TS? Because what happens is TypeScript is transpiled into JavaScript. So when we serve something to a browser, for example, TypeScript is not served. It's basically JavaScript that gets served. So we need to do the transpilation process, and then in our build folder, we get access to the index.js in here. What we also want to do is the same for module. So let's copy that. And again, do module, but this time it's ESM actually. So let's do the M there and then ESM there. So ECMAScript module. And now let's save that. So we're making good progress with this rollup config over here. And now actually what I'll do is go back into here, and then what we need to do is we will have plugins, because we need plugins as part of the bundling process for Rollup. So let's go ahead and import the plugins that we need. And again, this is going to be an array. And in here, we've got a few imports that we have imported in. And these are the plugins here. So if you hover over it, you can see plugin node resolve, plugin TypeScript, plugin CommonJS, plugin DTS, and plugin PostCSS. So essentially in this array, we will have access to all of the plugins. So let me go ahead and bring in the plugins that we are using, and I'll just quickly paste them in. So it's resolve, CommonJS, TypeScript. The TS config is in this file over here we're pointing to, and we're saying exclude any tests and also any stories, because we'll install Storybook as well. And then this is the PostCSS configuration as well. So this handles the PostCSS part, which is at the top over here. So that is that section done. But then again, there's something here which we need to do, which is the TypeScript definitions. So we've done the first object, and let me just confirm that is all complete, which it is. So now the second thing we need to do is handle the type definition. So let's create a new object, and essentially this needs an input and output as well. So let me just quickly bring in what I have in here and paste it in. So essentially we want the input to be the definition file in the ESM folder, which we generate from the dist folder when we run npm build or npm run build. Then the output is essentially an index.d.ts file in the format of ESM. The plugin we're using is the DTS, which is the definition TS, and we also have this optional external argument in here as well. So that is everything complete in our rollup bundle config. Let me just save it all. And now that we have the configuration all set, that's fine. Let's close it off. We don't need the TypeScript TS config anymore, but in here we have this scripts objects, and in the scripts object, what I want to do is have two scripts. First script is going to be the build, and also the second one is going to be dev. So let me just actually copy these ones over here. So the build script is fine. We'll keep that one. We don't need the test one, and we don't need the watch. What I also want to do is have a dev one in here, and essentially this dev one is the watch one. So let me just quickly do that. And now if I save, and now in the terminal, if I just clear it out, what I essentially want to do is run dev just to see what rollup does and see if there's any errors in our terminal. So everything is saved, and now all I want to do is do npm run dev. And what this should do is it will wait for any changes. Now you can see here it's basically saying that this is starting the project. And now let's see what the errors are. You can see here, could not find module tslib, so we need that one. So let's go ahead and import that in, or install that in, which is npm i -- save -dev tslib. Press enter. And now if we run npm run dev again. Now you can see everything built. So rollup ran, it built everything. It's waiting for changes. So if we make any changes in our components library now, it will update the changes in the dist folder. This disk folder gets uploaded into npm and we will handle that automation process soon. But let's go in the disk folder. We can see here we have an index.d.ts file which is handling all of our definitions. We have an ESM folder and a CJS folder. So basically what that is the two outputs we made in the rollup config. So let me just quickly go in here. We had output 1, which is this one, and output 2, which is basically the two folders that are created. Let's go in ESM and index.js. You can see this is all of the code that is basically outputted and converted into JavaScript. Now you can see this could all be minified as well, but we will leave that. And essentially what it's doing is this will then get uploaded, and essentially this is basically the transpiled version of our TypeScript code in the app, and it is served as JavaScript. So that is how it is working. If we go in here, you can see index.js map. This is essentially the source map for our folder, and we also have one in here as well. So the source map comes from tsconfig in here, and if you see where that is, it is here where line 18 source map true, which essentially is create the source map files for emitted JavaScript files. So basically everything in the disk folder is what we need to be shipped up to npm. And if we make any changes, so let's go in our index over here and add in some more text. This is my new text. This should update now. So you can see it says 1612. Now if I save, essentially what's happened is bundled everything up again and then created a new bundle for us. So I just want to go back to what we have here. And now let me just quickly save this. And now you can see our library is complete. It's essentially building everything, but what we want to do is further enhance this. So we want to add in unit testing with Jest and React testing library. And then we want to also have some sort of styling. So what we will do is we'll probably import styled components and install that as well. So first of all, what we'll do is add unit tests, and we'll do that next. Right, so now we've got our build running with Rollup. What we want to do is add the unit tests in. So we want to install Jest and React testing library. So what I first want to do actually is I've defined the main and the module. So if we go in Rollup config again, we've defined these two outputs, but we've not actually defined the output here for the index.d.ts. So we also need to do that. So let's go ahead and in package.json, I'm going to add this in, and essentially the types is going to be slash dist slash types index.d.ts, or actually what I'm going to do is delete this slash here like that. So now let's save that. And also what we also want to do is have files, and basically the files is going to be the dist. So if we hover over files, the files field is an array of files to include in your project. So basically we only want to include the dist folder. So again, we put that in here. So now what we need to do is close the terminal down, and let's get started with installing everything we need for our Jest and React testing library. So what I'm going to do is copy everything across. So now what we want to do is install the following dependencies here and import them in. So essentially it's testing library Jest DOM, testing library React, type for Jest, Jest itself, and we also need Jest environment JS DOM. So what we need to do is configure that in our package JSON to say let's actually specify the test environment. So in our case it's going to be JS DOM. So now that everything is installed, what we now need to do is we want to specify that the environment we're using is JS DOM for Jest. So essentially JS DOM is for anything to do with browser-like environment. So in our case it is. So that's what we need to do is have a new object in here, and this object is going to be having the key of Jest, and we want the test environment to be of JS DOM. So let's do that. So now that that's all the dependencies we've installed, all we need to do now is add a new object in here of Jest and set the test environment to JS DOM, which is adding any unit tests in for any browser-like environments. This is the environment we want to specify as JS DOM. So now let me save this. And one more thing we need to do is add the test command so we can run tests. And essentially that is going to be npm run test, and essentially it's going to be Jest. You can add extra flags as well, which we will do. So let me just copy what I have, and that is what it is. It's essentially saying watch all of the tests and it's verbose. So let me save that. And now what we want to do is create test files. So let's go ahead and do that. And now basically what will happen is it will look for anything that ends in test.ts or tsx or whatever it may be. So let's create the new file in here, and this can be named page.test.tsx or test.tsx or whatever you want it to be. And what I'm going to do first of all is import, and in here is going to be the React testing library that we want. So at testing library of Jest DOM. So that's the file we install. Let me just save that, and then what I'm going to do actually is create a describe block, and this is the page component. It renders title and children, so I'm just going to let basically GitHub Copilot do everything for me. And we need to import page from the relevant file, which is in index.tsx here. And then we also need to import render from React testing library. And then all we need to do is close this off now and save. And we also need to add an extra close bracket in here. So now what I want to do is basically run the test, and essentially is getting test title and children, is rendering the component out, is getting the items by text, and then is checking to see if it's in the document. So let's go ahead and do npm run test. And now you can see the Jest flag is running, and now you can see there's an error, it's failed. Let's go find out why it's failed. So now you can see here there's an error saying experimental syntax Jest isn't currently enabled. So we need to find out what the issue is with that. And if we scroll up, out of the box, Jest supports Babel, which will be used to transform your files into valid JS based on your Babel configuration. So basically, what it's saying is we need to install Babel, and what Babel is it is a JavaScript compiler. So basically, we need to transpile our JavaScript and TypeScript code, and then essentially is done with Babel. So now what we want to do is fix this. So what we'll do next is install Babel and configure that into our project as well. Right, so what we want to do now is install Babel and then configure it in our package JSON. This shouldn't take quite long, so let me just quickly exit out of here. So we want to do npm I dash dash save dash dev again, and then what I'm going to do is bring in the three packages that we need. So we need Babel slash preset env, we need Babel preset React, and Babel preset TypeScript. So press enter on that. And then what we need to do is after the Jest configuration here, we want to configure Babel. So what I'll actually do is copy the code I have and paste this in. So the three packages is basically what we are using in this Babel config that we have. So this is the config over here. It's quite self-explanatory. We've got a source type and we have some presets in here. So these are the three packages that we've used now. So now all I need to do is run test. So npm run test, and now the test should pass. And you can see here we've got one test passed. And what I want to do is make sure a failing test is happening just to see if it fails. So let me save this now. And now you can see it fails because title is in the document, and this is saying if it's not. So let me just save that, and now you can see the test has passed. So what I want to do next is install styled components, and then we should have everything configured in our component, and then after that we'll implement some best practices in our repo. So we will do that next. Right, so now the unit tests are passing, what I want to do is install styled components. So let's go to the documentation for styled components. So now we're on the website here. It's essentially allowing us to put CSS in JS. We need to install it. So again, you would do npm I styled components. So again, this time we want to do the save dev once again. So npm I dash dash save dev of styled components. So now we can use the components to style our actual page component. So in page now, I'm going to create a new file called styled.ts, and in here I'm going to create a component of a container. So export const container, or you could call it page container, is equal to style.div, and we can give it some styling, and then what we need to do is import styled from styled components. So now, as you can see here, the way we're importing it is from styled components, which is essentially a library, and this is how we want to do it. But instead of style being like this, it will be like this. So essentially, we will import the page in like that. So now we've imported the style components. We want to just import container in our page. So this will now be the container like that. So again, what we need to do is make sure that this works, and the way it will work is by a unit test, and we want to visually see this as well. So we will add Storybook in after this, but let's go ahead and add another unit test in here, and this unit test is going to be an it renders the correct styling. So the container is basically what we need to target. So it renders the correct styling, and now we render the component, and then we have the styles in here. So let's go ahead, and in our style.ts we want to pick something. So let's just do the background color of this over here, this F5. We don't want to test anything else, so let's have this in here, and we can actually copy it over. So it has the style of the background color, and it's F5 in here. So container is essentially the container, but we don't have a text ID. We can add one in. So let me go ahead and do that. So page container, if we go into the index over here, this will be data dash test ID is equal to the page container that we have in here, and this needs to be wrapped in strings. So now let's go ahead and test that this all works. So let me save all, and then the way to test it is npm run test, and now this will watch for all the changes, and now you can see there's an error now. What's the error going to be here? Unexpected token. We just need to close this off, so let me just close that off here. So now the tests are passing. So just to verify that, let's just change the color to a black, and now save. And now you can see that's the wrong color. It expects the color that we have defined in the style component. So again, now you can see the test is passing. So now we've implemented style components. This is how we would handle our styling in the components library itself. What we're going to be doing next is installing Storybook as well. So then we'll have a story in here that we can visually see. And this is good for people that want to visually see and test their components as well. So we'll do that next. Right, so what we want to do is we want to be able to see what we're actually building as well. So the way to do that is with Storybook. Essentially, it gives us this UI over here where we have all of our stories for our components that we make, and then we can test them out visually. So because it's a React component library that we're making and not a React app, we can't actually inject anything into the DOM like the React does with injecting everything into the root ID on the HTML page. So let's go ahead and install this. This is just going to be quite brief, and we won't be talking about it in depth, but essentially all we need to do is run this. So let's go ahead and run it in our terminal. So let's clear everything out and then run npx storybook latest init, and this will initialize everything in our Storybook in our app. So now we want to use a module bundler, and we have two to choose from, which is V and Webpack. We already have Rollup installed in our app, and that handles the bundling process for the disk folder, but this is separate. This is going to be for our Storybook itself. So let's go ahead and choose V. Now it's going to install everything for us. What we want to do is just wait for that to install. Right, so now that's installed everything for us. There's a few changes that have happened in our code, so let's close everything down. And now you can see we have a Storybook file at the top over here. We also have the stories folder here as well, so that is in source of stories. So if we go into our browser, you can see here V has opened Storybook. So let's go into the browser and you get this UI presented to you. You can go through the tour, but I'm just going to skip the tour. Essentially, we have stories on the left. These are the stories here, which is button. In button, we have docs, which is the documentation for the button. We have the primary button, the secondary button, large, small, and we can interact with these. So essentially we can toggle from true to false and you can see the values and what's happening. So if we click the button, actions happen. Interactions we won't cover, but essentially there's quite a lot you can do. You can change the label and you can see what's happening in here in real time. You can change the color and change the background color in like that, like so, and so on. But basically what happens is this button renders certain props and then these props get rendered and we can change things around in here. So we can visually see what's happening with our components. So now what we want to do is the page component that we've made, that's the one we want to work with. So I'm just going to delete everything in the stories folder in here, and then essentially what we want to do in components in here, we want to create a new file called page.stories.tsx. So now essentially what will happen is I'm going to bring in what I have for my stories for page and explain it to you. So now I've imported everything in. I need to import the relevant page component, which is page. So this is the children of the page and so on. And now let me save this and let's test it in the UI. So if we go into page and then you can see this is page one title and so on. So let's go on to page one. This is the page one title. We can add more in here and you can see it's getting rendered and it's rendering the relevant information. If we had any actions, we could pass them in. So similar to what we saw with the button, we could do that as well. And then we also have the docs in here as well. So this is how you would visually see your storybook components. But yeah, essentially that's what I wanted to cover in this section, which is installing Storybook in case you wanted to have this into your project. Right, so now that we have our project complete, essentially this component library can be ready to deploy to npm itself. So all you would do is run npm run build just to make sure everything is building, the bundle is working correctly and so on. And you can see there's no errors or anything, so that's fine. So what we could do now is publish it to npm, but what we now want to do is refine this and implement some best practices in for a professional environment. So this is the step where you would go the extra mile to improve your code, make it look more professional, add some further checks, and also automate the pipeline using Circle CI. So what we are going to be doing is we have this code here. Let's go ahead and implement some best practices, some linting rules, adding Husky in, and so on. So first of all, what I want to do is be able to automate my change log. So whenever I make a change in the code, then essentially I will automate this process in Circle CI. So let's go ahead and start with implementing Husky itself. So going into our component library architecture, what we've essentially done is this component library here, we've imported in Jest, we've done TypeScript, and we also need to do ESLint and Husky as well. We've done the rollup part, which is fine, so we can check that one off. And then we also need to do this. So Circle CI will basically handle everything in here, upload it to npm. We don't need to do anything. It's quite easy to do. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is go in and install Husky. So let's go into the Husky docs. You want to search for Husky npm and click in here. So now as you can see, this is a npm package as well. So this is what we actually are creating. So what we can do is copy npm Husky here like so, or we could click to the repository. So this is where we would have the information for the project itself. But what I want to do is just go into the docs, and in the docs click get started. And what we want to do is do the recommended steps, which is Husky init. So let's copy that. And back in our project, in our terminal, we just want to paste that in npx husky init. So now we will go through a series of questions. So yeah, it's okay to proceed. And now what's happened is a Husky folder here has been initialized. So let's close everything down and go into the Husky folder. So in here, we have a pre-commit that says npm test. And in our package JSON, we should have a script for Husky in here. So if we scroll all the way to prepare, it says Husky in here. So now what I want to do is try and commit, and what will happen is it will run a test, and if the test fails, then it will exit the commit. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me first of all go in source, in test, and let me just do a failing test, because it should pass, because essentially the tests are passing. So let me just quickly do npm run test, and we want a failing test. So now this will test everything, and we have one failing test, so that's good for us now. And what we want to do is let's commit these changes using Husky. And actually what I also want to do before I do any of this is let's actually install everything once all over again. So let's delete the package lock. So let me delete that. And let me also delete the node modules, because what we want to do is make sure everything is installed in correctly. And in our package JSON, you can see if we scroll down, we have dev dependencies, but we also have dependencies. So let's move them into the dev dependencies, because what we actually want is actual dev dependencies and not dependencies, because this is a component library. So now let's just check everything is in here. So we have Storybook command, we have a build Storybook command, we have the dev and build command, and we also have the test command. We also have Husky in there as well. So let me clear this out, and then what I want to do is do npm install. Now this will install everything from afresh for us again. So now everything's installed again. What I want to do is try to commit, and essentially this Husky should run npm test before it commits any changes. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's do git status. So what we want to do is add everything, and essentially what we have done is added Storybook. So I'm just going to do git commit, and it's going to be -m, and the commit message is going to be a feature, and it's going to say added Storybook. Press enter. So now, as you can see, it's running the test. So let's go ahead and see what's happened. It ran the test, so this is a pre-commit check, and it basically exited out. So if we go up a bit more further, you can see that it ran the test, nothing happened, and essentially it stopped committing the code, and you can see it here, it's still here on the left. So what we want to do is further configure this now. So that's good. What we can do is actually add further to this. So we need to add a hash. So I'm just going to make this look a bit better. So it's a hash and then exclamation mark /bin/bash, and then essentially now we can add the comments in. So these are the checks that you should do before you commit your code. So all we want to do here is, first of all, we want to run tests before the commit, which is what we did. We ran a test, essentially npm test, and then we also want to make sure we want to lint. So we need to add a linter, and we'll do that. And we also want to make sure the build works. So let's go ahead and make sure build works. So essentially this is the steps that we want to take before we do the commit. So essentially when a user in your team or project is working, they would sometimes be careless, or they might make a mistake and forget to do these checks. These are the checks that we should do before we commit code up into our GitHub itself. So let me just save that. And what we need to do is we need to have a linter. So what we will do is, we've done the pre-commit check. Now we want to do a linter check. And then what we also want to do is follow the conventional commits, which we will look at later on. But essentially, if you saw my commit message here, I did something here which was feat, which means it's a feature, and then I'm describing the feature, because what will happen is this will then get added to a changelog. So we will install a package called standard version, and then the changelog is automated, and we will automate it in our circle CI pipeline. So we'll look at that later. But essentially what this pipeline is this section over here in our component architecture, so the CI/CD pipeline. So first of all, we've done Husky itself. We want to do ESLint, make sure all of the processes we've described are working correctly. In here, for our pre-commit, we will also do a commit message, which will check that we are following the conventional commits practices over here. If they are not met, then the commit won't go ahead as well. So it's just adding extra checks before we do our commits or our pushes to our relevant branches. So what we want to do next is we want to configure our linter, and we will do that with ESLint. Right, so now what we are doing is we are adding pre-commit hook to run tests before the commit. That one's fine. So now what we want to do is run a linter before the commit as well. So the way to run a linter is to install ESLint. Now, if we go onto eslint.org in here, you can see here, find and fix problems in your JavaScript code. So let's click get started, and you can see here, let's quickly copy this. All we need to do is run npm init at eslint config. So let's implement that in now and press enter, and we should get a few questions to ask for. So now we have the 3 questions here, how you would like to use ESLint. What I'm going to do is choose the third one because this covers all the bases and it gives you the flexibility. If you wanted to do just the syntax only, you can do. If you wanted to check syntax and find problems, you can do. This one essentially covers everything, so you can enforce a coding style as well. So let's press enter, and now we want to use JavaScript modules because that's what we are using, and we are also using React. So does your project use TypeScript? Yes, it does. So let's press enter, and the code does run in the browser. So let's just do that. So essentially this is front end because we are creating a UI components library. Let's actually use a configured template, which is a popular style guide, and then we will just use the standard one, which is from TypeScript. And how do you want to configure it? Let's do it in JSON and press enter. So now let's go ahead, and it will say, do you want to install everything? So again, yes, let's go ahead and do that. And we can use npm yarn or pnpm, and because we have a package lock files, we will just do npm because that's consistent. And now we will wait for everything to install. Right, so now everything's installed. If we go into our package.json file, and if we go up to the dev dependencies, you can see now we have ESLint installed in here with all of these plugins that were imported as well. We also have a ESLint rc.json file, so let's go in there, and now you can see these are the essentially what we've installed. So it extends the standards with TypeScript, and it also got the React plugin as well. If you wanted to extend these rules further, then you can do in here. So in here you could add some suggested rules. So suggested rules, and you have quite a few that you could choose from, or you could go in the docs and add whatever you want as the configurations in here. But essentially what I want to do is just use the recommended one, which we went through in the setup process. So now all we need to do is add a command to run the linter. So if we go into here, and essentially if we go in configurations, you have more rules in here such as semis and quotes, and we can also extend as well in here. So now if you go to next steps, you got some further information that you could have, but essentially now we have a linter set up. So now all we want to do is we've got this configured. Now if we go in our package.json, we need to add a script. So underneath the scripts we have is lint. So we want to do ESLint in here for everything in the same directory. So dot, which is essentially everything in here. And we also want to add a lint fix, which is again ESLint dot fish dash dash fix in here like that. So now let's save this, and let me quickly run npm run lint. So let me clear everything out and do npm run lint. And now it's running ESLint, and you can see there's 2 problems. What are the problems? Let me go up, and you can see these are the issues, which is essentially in our dist folder. So actually what we will do is we only want to lint anything in our source folder. So it will be /source like that, and again this will be /source, because the dist folder is essentially what we are doing as the final thing. it should be linted before that happens. So what we want to do is target the files within here. So this will be anything with the extension of TS or TSX. I don't think there's anything else other than that. So yeah, that's fine. So now let's save that and let me do npm run lint and press enter. So now we're getting these errors in our linter. What we need to do is we could either fix them with npm run lint dash colon fix like so, or we could add these rules in here and fix it. So let's go ahead and paste in the relevant rules we need. So now we brought in our rules in here. All we now need to do is run npm run lint dash fix or colon fix and press enter. And now we'll fix all of it. And then we need to run lint again just to check it's all fixed. And now you can see there's no issues being reported. So one last thing is React version not specified in ESLint plugin React. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we close this terminal down a bit and create a new object in here, and this is settings, and essentially we want to be able to detect the version of React that we are using. So now let me just quickly run npm run lint again. And now you can see it ran the linter and there's no issues whatsoever. So now if we go into the pre-commit hook over here, what will happen is it will run the test, it will run the linter, it will run the build, and then if everything passes, then we should be able to commit. So let's first of all run npm test, because what we did was we essentially did a failing test before. So we need to basically fix that now. So in our test, this needs to be in the document. So let's save. This test should now pass, which it is doing. Right, so now what I'm going to do is going to commit everything in here. So essentially what should happen is it should run test, then run lint, then run build, and then everything should commit. So essentially all of the pre-commit checks are here. If they will pass, then they should commit the code. So hopefully this should commit now. So essentially it will be git add and then git commit, and then the feature is add Storybook, ESLint, and Husky. So if I press enter, and you can see it's done its linting checks up here, then it's done the unit test, and then it also built. And now if you scroll all the way down, you can see everything has been uploaded into GitHub here. So all I want to do now is do git push, press enter, and now what we have done is we have done the pre-commit hook, which is a check to run the test, run the lint, and run the build. If everything passes, then obviously we would then commit our code. So what we're going to be doing next is adding conventional commits and standard version, ensuring that when we have our commit messages, they fall according to the conventional commit standards, and we will do that next. Right, so far for best practices, we've installed ESLint to manage our linting for our app itself. We also have had Husky, which installs the pre-commit hooks, and we can run certain checks before we even commit our code. But what I also want to do is enforce conventional commits, or a standard where we would have a certain piece of text within our commit, so git commit, and then we need to have this as a standard of text, so that when we import a commit, we can't put something in bad, like something random like this is bad text or whatever it may be. We need to have a certain structure, and then that structure can then generate us an automatic changelog file. That changelog file can then be released and also have information on there that actually makes sense. So what we need to do is install conventional commits or enforce conventional commits. So if we go on to conventionalcommits.org and click quick summary, essentially this is the specification is a lightweight convention on top of commit messages. It provides an easy set of rules for creating an explicit commit history, which makes it easier to write automated tools on top of. So this is where Circle CI will come in. This convention details with Semver, which is a standard semantic versioning in here, where we would handle our versioning for our npm package. So if you want to read up on that, you can do further in that URL over there. But essentially what we are doing is we're defining a type of the commit. So far I've done feat, which is feature. You can add parentheses and an optional scope, and then the description is essentially what we have done in our commit basically. So if we scroll down, I believe there should be examples, but if there isn't, then I suppose you can Google it, and here's the examples actually. So if we scroll up, actually here it says recommends, and then you have all of these as the keys. So essentially you could have a build, a chore, CI, docs, style, refactor, and so on. And then what that would do is that's the key, and then you would describe what you are doing. So now let's apply conventional commits to our application. So first of all, let's go in our code over here, and I want to install a couple of things. So npm I, and it's dash dash save dash dev, and the first thing I want to install is at commit lint slash CLI, and also at commit lint slash config dash conventional, and also I want to have standard dash version. So now let me install all of this, and then what we also need to do is at the highest level here we need to create a config file. So this is commit lint.config.js. So let me just quickly rename this because I've done a mistake. And in here, all we want to do is module.export is equal to, and then essentially this is what we want to extend it as. So let me save that. This is what we've just installed in our applications. So now all I need to do is, it should enforce it for us now. So there's one more thing we need to do is add the release command, and the release command is essentially standard version like that. So now there's one more step to complete, which is in our terminal. So let me just paste in this, which is npx husky add, and then we want to add a commit message file, which essentially adds it. But again, it says here add command is deprecated, so let's instead create a new file in Husky folder, and in this folder what it will be is commit-msg like so, and then let's paste in the relevant information in here. So now let's save, and I'm actually going to delete this command, and in here we want to do npx -- no install commit lint -- edit like that, and the $S1 in here like so. So let me just wrap this in the string value, and now if I save, now what should happen is if I save all, and now I want to try and commit my changes, so git add, and then it's git commit, and this is a bad commit message. So let me press enter. It will run my pre commit hooks in here, then it should check this over here to see if the commit message was successful. And as you can see now, it says subject may not be empty and type may not be empty, and it says get help on the conventional commit changelog. So now we've essentially enforced the rules. So all we need to do now is do git status, because now we just need to add the relevant commit message. So in here now, instead of this is a bad commit message, what we essentially want to do is declare and describe what we've actually done. So what have we done is we can say feature again, and I'm sure you can find a better one, but feature, and in this feature we have added conventional commits and also added standard version. And we've also basically enforced the commit message as well in our project over here. So let me press enter, and now what should happen is this should do our pre-commit checks and then also complete the process, which is committing the changes to GitHub, which it has done this time. And you can see over here there's no errors in what we have done, and there's no exits. So now all we need to do is git push. So now that is all complete. We have successfully configured everything here on our project. The one last thing to do is to automate everything once we commit our changes to GitHub, and we will do that next with Circle CI. So far what we've looked at is linting. So we've configured some ESLint rules, installed all of the relevant packages, enforced some coding standards and styles, and then what we also have done is with Husky run some pre-commit checks in our code to GitHub, which then basically does all of these checks, which runs tests, lints the code and builds it. And then also we have enforced commit lint with conventional commits to make sure our commit messages or confirming to the relevant standards. So that is all complete. What we now need to do is implement Circle CI. So let's go ahead and look at the docs. So if we go into Circle CI, and here we click on the link, and now you can see here it says build anything fast, the CI/CD platform for the AI future. So now what we want to do is start building for free, and we want to sign up, and you can sign up with your GitHub provider and so on. I am signing up on this account for the first time, so let's click continue, and all you need to do is put in your email and password, and I will be right back. So now I've created my account. I can essentially fill in all of these steps. I'm a software engineer, set up a project. It's just myself basically, and then I'm just going to say let's go. And now what we can do is where can we find your code? So essentially we've uploaded our code to GitHub. So this is what we will be clicking. And if you have GitLab or Bitbucket, again, that is up to you. And now you can install and authorize all of your repositories or just the one. I'm just going to select only selected repositories. And the repository I want is React Component Library. So let me type that in. And now you can see this is the one. So let me click on it and then install and authorize. And I just need to put in my password and confirm. So once you've done all your configurations with Circle CI with the SSH keys, then what will happen is you should see something like this, which is a dashboard. So now all you need to do is verify your email and so on. But essentially, if we go into projects, you will have a project in here. So essentially, this is where all of your pipelines would run. So what we want to do is if you click into this project, and you can see all of the pipelines that are running and so on. And let me just refresh. As you can see here, it says now that your configuration and triggers are set up, commit a change to your code and source to trigger your first pipeline. You'll see it in here once you do. So essentially, if you look in the docs over here, it will tell you how to kind of connect and configure everything together in your app. So you could essentially connect your code and so on with GitHub, and it gives you all of the information. But what we want to do is we want to click on getting started, and in here we want to essentially know how to be able to run pipelines. So if we go into introduction Circle CI migration, if we scroll down, this is how we would migrate anything across. But what we essentially want to do is do the basics. So let's do test, and we want to do automated testing. And now you can see here it's given us scripts on how we could do all of the information that we want to do. But in our case, what we want to do is we want to essentially run the tests. We want to run the linter, run build, and then we want to do a release, and then also deploy our code as well to npm. So now what we want to do is we want to create our own automations. We need to create a YAML file first of all, and that is going to be done in our code. So let's go back into our code. At the top level here, we need to create a new folder, and this folder is going to be called .circle.ci. And in Circle CI, we need to create a new YAML file called config.yaml. So this is where we would define all of our Circle CI automation configs in here. So there's a few things we need to do. First one, so if we go back in here, and we have jobs, we need to define jobs, but we also need to define the version. So what I want to do is find the actual docs first of all. So now we're on the web app introduction. You can see all of this information. If you want to read further, you can do, but essentially we need to find the quick starter guide for getting started. So if we find this one here, which is Node Quick Start, so now this is the step-by-step instructions on what we can do with our configurations with YAML. So first of all, we need to specify a version. So every Circle CI config YAML starts with a version key. So this is the latest version key. So again, let's go ahead and do that. So copy that and paste it in. And then a second step was use the node orb. So this is like a Docker image. If you've used Docker before, it's the same thing. An orb is basically like an image in Docker. So it contains a set of pre-packaged Circle CI configurations. You can easily install Node and its package managers. So this is the latest one we need to install. So again, let's paste that one in. Then we need to define jobs. So it says here create jobs. So it says build and test the app. What we can do is copy this, but what I want to do is define the jobs in here myself. The job we want to do is to lint the code. So let's just define the jobs now. And if you press enter, you can see here is GitHub Copilot is suggesting a job, but what we want to do is do lint code. So lint underscore code like that. And then if we use this, what happens is it has an executor, and that executor is node/default. So if you hover over it, it says the name of the executor to use defined via the top level executors map. So we essentially want to use node default in here. The next thing we can do is we can also add a description, which is lint code. And you can add quotations in there, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. And then after that, what we do is we have steps. So the first step here is checkout, which essentially is a special step used to check out our source code to the configured path, defaults to working directory. The reason for this special step is because it is more of a helper function designed to make sure that the checking out code, because it is more of a helper function designed to make checking out code easy for you. If you require doing Git over HTTPS, you should not use this step as it configures Git to check out over SSH. So essentially we need this step, so we'll keep that in. Then we want to install the node packages. So let's go ahead and install node packages like that. And you can also specify further, so you could use the package manager and the working directory, but we don't want to use that for now. So it will be check out node install packages, and then what we want to do is run the command. So what we can do here is just do run like that, and essentially what this run will do, it'll take in a name which is lint code, and also the command which is npm run lint like that. What we can also do, if we go in our package JSON, you can see the commands in here. So this is where it will take the commands from. So npm run lint will essentially trigger ESLint like that. But what we want to do is run lint fix. So let's copy this and add that in as well here at the end. So what we've done essentially is configured all of the steps to run the linter and fixing the linter in here. So what will happen then is it will run lint fix after installing npm packages up here. So check out node install packages, and then it will run our linter in here. So that is our first job defined. Now what we want to do is define more jobs, and then later we look at using a workflow to run these jobs in a sequence. So let's go ahead and define our next job, which essentially is going to be copied from Husky. So in our pre-commit hooks, we do a few checks in here. We do npm run test, npm run lint, and npm run build. So these are the 3 steps we want to do. So we can do that as well. So let's go ahead. We've done the linter. Now what we want to do is run the test. So let's create a new job. So this job is going to be called run underscore tests like this. And what we can do essentially is copy the same steps as above, which is having the executor as node/default, the description, steps. So we again need to install the packages and so on. And we also want to then run the test. And then once we've done that, we also want to run build. So again, following the same theme, we need to define the job for build, which is essentially installing everything and then running the build. But this here will need to be run in a sequence. So first of all, what we want to do is lint the code and fix any changes or any ESLint errors. Then we want to run the test. Once the tests have passed, then we want to run build on it. And then what we want to do eventually is run a release and then also deploy our code to npm. So deploying our dist folder to npm, and then in another application we can then use this entire React component library in there. So let me just save this for now. And then what we want to do is if we commit our code, then we want to go into our browser in our Circle CI project. This is the project here. If we click into it, then we want to create jobs. So these are the jobs I've done testing earlier. And what we essentially want to do is create a new workflow, and then the jobs will run from there. So what we will do, if we go into the docs once again, we've created our job. So that's step 3, which is essentially jobs, and you could have put them all in one job, or you could separate them like we have done. we will look at this one here, which is persist to workspace, which is optimizing the build process. We'll look at that later on, but I just want to break it down into simple, smaller chunks for now. So here it says if we scroll down, we want to deploy the app, and you can skip that step as well because we've done option A, which is build and test the app. And then what we want to do next is create a workflow. So if you see here, it says a workflow is a set of rules defining a collection of jobs and their run order. So what happens is this build test deploy here, if we command F that, if we go up to the top, there's not any jobs for that because what happens is this is the name of the workflow. So now what we want to do, this workflow below has the jobs in here. So the job is we want to deploy, which requires build and test at the start. So first job we do is build and test, which is essentially the job we have created up here. So we're bringing in the jobs into our workflow, and then we're saying to our workflow to run these jobs basically. So what we'll do is we'll do that now. So let me go back in the code, and underneath let's do workflow, and this workflow is going to be named, and you can name it whatever you want, but this is going to be build app. This is what I'm going to name it as. This is the job, and underneath here we want to grab these jobs, so lint code, run tests, and build in here. So let's go ahead and do that. So in build app we need jobs. So again, we need to define the jobs, and the jobs essentially are going to be the lint code and the run tests and the build. So what will happen is when we run this workflow, they will run all at the same time. So let's save this, and we need to just commit our changes, and then the pipeline will trigger. So git add git commit -m, and this is going to be CI, and we are going to have integrate our first workflow. So if we go back in here in our circle CI, what happens is if we go into pipelines, this was the workflow I created in my testing environment. So we need to ignore that one. And the name of this workflow, if you go back in here, is called build app. What this build app will do is it will lint the code, run the test, and also build. And these will all run at the same time. So let's commit these changes. And then this will run all of our pre-commit checks in Husky. So let's close that down. You can see it's got an error in here, what's going on in here. And we've checked the node version, and it's the wrong node version. So make sure you're using the correct node version. And this is using MVM use version 18. So let's go ahead and use that. And then we will need to, again, commit the changes. So if you want to check your git status, let's go ahead and do that. So git status. So we've added our circle CI config in there. Now we just need to commit the changes that we specified earlier, which will then trigger the pre-commit hooks we've discussed in the previous video about the Husky commands. So now you can see this has gone to empty here, and now we just need to sync changes. So all you will run in the terminal is git push. Now this will push the changes, but what we want to do is this pipeline will trigger now. So let's refresh the page, and you can see here it says running, and all three commands in here or jobs are running at the same time. Now what we essentially want to do is run them sequentially. So first of all, let's just analyze it, and you can see here we have 3 passes, 3 ticks. So it's still saying running in here. Let's see if we refresh the page what happens. You can see now here it says success. It took 18 seconds. You can also trigger the rerun of the workflow, and there's other options in here. So you can copy the pipeline ID and go in project settings. But what we want to do is if we go into here, we can click into build app. So let's do that. And then you can see here, this is how long everything took for each single job. So let's click into run test and see what exactly happened in run test. First of all, it's spun up the environment. It does all of these checks in here. Then it prepares environment variables. Then it checks out your code. So this is the checkout command that we had defined in our jobs. So let's go back in our jobs. This is the checkout here. And then the next one will be node install packages, and then the npm command that we specify for the job itself. So checking package JSON, let's go ahead in that one. You can essentially click show more if you want to see it. And then determining lock file, restoring cache. Then we go into installing the npm packages, and then we're saving the cache. So if you think about the cache, we can reuse that in our jobs. So we will do that later on. Then we remove temporary links, and then we finally run the test. And you can see here, it runs our test that we have defined in our page.test.tsx in here. So that is essentially what happens in the job itself. You can go back into the workflow, so you just click on build app. You can do the same checks in here, and again, what will happen is this will tell you all of the information we've looked at. We also have here at the bottom, we have 20 pipelines a day. This is on the free tier I'm on, and also 5 pipelines a day. It says here some more information which you can click and learn more about. Let's close that off. So we now go into our project. We have our first successful workflow running. What we want to do is we first of all want to lint the code, then we want to run the test, and then we want to do the build. So let's go and fix that in our config. So first of all, we want to lint code, then in run test, there's a, if we expand it, so we do colon, and then essentially it's the requires keyword, which is requires lint code. Now we want to do the same for build, but build requires the run tests like that. So I also want to delete this and call this build because it's the same as the workflow name as well. So now we save that. What will happen is it will run sequentially now. So dependent on this job completing, run test will run, and dependent on run test completing, build will run. So let's quickly do that. So git add and then git commit, and this commit is ci run jobs sequentially in a sequence. So let's press enter and commit them changes, and then all we need to do is once the pre-commit hooks have worked, then we just need to push our changes. So git push, press enter, and now going back in here, a new job should trigger. So let's refresh the page. Now you can see it's running, but if we open it up, now you can see only lint code is running. So when lint code completes, run test should run. When run test completes, then build will run. So let's just wait for that. So now you can see the green tick mark, which means it's complete. Then run test will complete. So this should take another 14 seconds or 13 seconds, however long it takes. And then after that, what will happen is the build will run as well. So now you can see run test has complete, and then build will run as well. So now you can see that's our pipeline complete. So we've got everything working correctly in there. And also, if we go into our repository up here and press refresh, you can see now it's also connected to our GitHub app. And you can see here it says success 1 minute ago. That's the latest pipeline. So if we click on it, it basically shows you all of these checks that have passed. So we can further click into the details, which will then send us into the workflow itself. But yeah, let's go ahead and press back. And this is our code that we've committed the changes for. So all we want to do now is the build process is working. So everything is building correctly. Now what we want to do is go in to npm, run a release. So you can create a release in here, because what we've done is we use standard version to create a release. And then once we've done the release, what we also want to do is then deploy our code to npm. So let's go ahead and do that. So going back in our code in here, we also need to define a few new jobs. So let's go ahead and do that. And the first job is going to be run release. So run underscore release is essentially running the release. So again, we need to check out node install packages and then npm run release. Let's go in our package JSON, and you can see this is the release here, which is releasing with standard version. So all we need to do is double check we have standard version installed in our dev dependencies as well, which we have done over here. So let's close that down. We're running the release, and then what we also want to do is essentially deploy our code to npm. So what we want to do is do that job. So publish underscore to npm. So again, this does npm publish, but again, what we need to do is we need to publish to our own npm login details. So this is where we need to add an npm token. So this token will connect to npm, and then they will basically know that this is where we need to publish our component library. But first of all, we need to save this, and then we need to first of all add these jobs into the workflow. So let's go ahead and do that. So run release is essentially required by build, and then also publish to npm is required by run release. So now we have this workflow and everything complete. We first of all need to make sure release is being run, and then once the release has been run, then we need to publish to npm. So there will be some errors, but what I want to do is I want to add everything and run the pipeline to see what actually happens. So this run jobs is essentially ci added release and npm jobs. So let's commit that. It's going to do our pre-commit checks, and then obviously this we need to publish and push everything to GitHub. So in our terminal, you can see here everything's worked. The build has completed in here. We have our dist folder with our relevant files that we need. So in here, what I also want to do is we want to check if we are actually logged into npm, and the way to do that is with the command. So npm who am I. So let's check who am I, and I should be logged into another account. So let's go ahead and check, and now you can see here it says this is my account. So what we want to do is go into npm itself, and we want to log into a new account. So let's create a new account. So I'll show you how to do that next. Right, so now we logged into npm. If you haven't got an npm account, then all you need to do is essentially register. So in the top right corner, you can see here we need to log into this account. So if we go in packages, let's check if we have any packages, which we don't. So that's a good sign. Or if you already have some, is fine. What determines the package name is in the package.json file. So if we go in our package JSON, and where it says name, so if you command F to name, this is essentially what the name of the library will be. So if you wanted to have a private one, then I believe you can do at and then your name and then slash, and that will make it private. So at Imran Codes, like that. But essentially we want to make this public. So let's just do React component library, but this name might already be taken. So what I'm going to do is call it something else. So it's going to be Imran Codes React component library. I believe that name would not be taken. So let me just save that first of all. And actually I want to add some more description in here from the Imran Codes YouTube channel, just so it explains it further. And then you also can add in the links for this, which are here. So we have the repository URL in here as well. So, and then also the homepage, which has the README, and you can also add more to the README if you wanted to. I believe I don't have one at the minute, but essentially you could add your own in, just adding the instructions of how to use your repository, and also other aspects such as Storybook, and you could also build a Storybook and then host that somewhere as well. So there's quite a lot you still need to do, but we'll just configure the Circle CI in this video. So let me just save everything, and then let's close this off. And what we want to do is go back in npm. We have 0 packages in here. So what we want to do is log into this account so we can then upload our code or our npm package in here. So in our terminal, we've essentially done some changes. So what we now need to do is do npm log out, or actually what we'll do npm login, and then the username it's asking for is the username up here. So this username is Imran Code. So let's type that in, Imran_code, press enter, and then it's going to ask for the password. So I'm just going to type that in, and then the email. So I'm just going to put in my email, imrancodes@gmail.com. And now it's asking for a one-time password. So I'll check my email and put it back in. So I'll be right back. Right, so now you can see here it says I'm logged in as Imran Code. So let's just double check that I am actually logged in. So all I need to do is do npm who am I again, and then this will say I'm logged in as Imran Code. So that's fine, that's working. So now what I can do is we can publish to obviously Imran Codes in here. That's where we want to publish our repository into. But first of all, we want to trigger the pipeline now, because what's happened is we've added the run release and we've also published to npm. So let's see what happens when we do both of these. So let me just add these in. So git add, and then we want to commit. But this time what we've done is we've added further configurations to the app, and I'm just going to save that. And you can, this isn't a specific name I've put in there, but again, this all of these commits will get added to your release file. So what we want to do is we want to be more descriptive than what I've just done there. But again, we also did the release in the other commit. So now what we want to do is do two commits. So it's git push, and then this should trigger a new pipeline. So let's go ahead in our Circle CI pipelines, and once we refresh, we should see the pipeline running, which it is doing over here. And now you can see there's a bit of a difference, which is we've added the extra jobs of run release and publish to npm. So what will happen is we'll be right back, because there will be some errors in this. Right, so now that's finished, you can see here it says there's an error on run release, so therefore the pipeline stops. So let me just click on run release, and here we have essentially what the error is. So what we need to do is we need to set a git config user email and a git config username. So then obviously that person is the person that's done the release. So we need to add that in. But what we will also look at is environment variables, because we don't want to actually add in our email into the code in our config. So essentially in here, we don't want to add in the username and the email in here. We need to set it as environment variables. So let's go ahead and do that. So after run build, in run release, we install the packages, then we run the release. But what we also need to do is do some extra checks in here. So this will be run like that, and then this is where we need to set up git and obviously add the user email and the username like so. So now what happens is we want to set up git credentials in here, and then essentially what will happen is we need to put in the user email and the username. But what we want to do is get this from the environment variables in Circle CI. So what you would do is do the $, and then you could call it get email, and then this one will be $get name like that. So we need to save this first of all, and then also once it's saved, we need to go into Circle CI in the project settings and set these environment variables. So if we copy the get email name, and in Circle CI at the top in projects, then we have our project. So you could have multiple projects. If we go into React component again, and then in our project settings, we click through to here, and here on the left it says environment variable. So let's click that, and then all we want to do is add an environment variable. So paste this in, which is the get email, and then you put in your get email in here. And then also you would do the same for the get name. So I'll do that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've set the environment variables. If we go back in our code and double check that this run release command looks correct. So when we run release, what we want to do is we want to have the executor, then we want the description and the steps in here, and then we run the command of set up git credentials, which essentially sets the git config user email and the username. So we put them in the environment variables, then we run the release. So that's fine. What we also want to do is before we publish, we need to make sure that we are publishing to the correct environment or the correct npm login information. So the command is npm publish, but we also need to set the environment, which is essentially the npm token that we need. So it could be npm underscore token equals npm token like that. And now we need to kind of generate a token in npm and then add this as an environment variable in Circle CI. So what we'll do, let's go in our npm over here. So in npm, if we go to the left here where it says access tokens, let's click here, and now you can see we have an access token. But what we want to do is generate a new one and then generate a classic token. Then you fill in your password and continue, and then you can give this a name. So this is Circle CI login or something like that. And in the three options in here, we want to do the automation one, because what happens is it bypasses the two-factor authentication because we're doing it in our CI/CD workflow in here. And then what you would do is click generate token. So now that I generated the token, all you need to do is copy that, and then you need to add it as an environment variable in here. So add environment variable, and then whatever we named this token, which was npm underscore token, like that. And then you also paste in the token that you get from npm into here. So I will do that and be right back. Right, so now we've connected the npm token. I believe this should all work correctly now. So what we need to do is go into our Circle CI pipeline. So if we press back and then in project, what we want to do is essentially run the pipeline again. So all the changes we've made, let's just look through them, which is essentially the environment for our npm publish is npm underscore token, and then the environment variable in here. And then in the release command, we need to set up some Git credentials in here. So once they're set, then we can run the release. So let's go ahead and trigger this workflow. So let's add this and push our changes. So git add, and then it's essentially going to be git commit, and then we want to put in here completed, release, and build and publish jobs. And now let this run the checks with Husky, and then what will happen is we will run git push and then check and trigger the pipeline. So now all we need to do is git push, and then this will push our changes, and then all we need to do is in our Circle CI refresh the page. Now you can see the job is running in here, and all of these steps for the jobs are running as well. So now what happens is it did run the release, but it didn't publish to npm. So let's just double check what's actually happened in here. And we get the following error, which says you need to authorize this machine using npm add user. So let's go ahead and fix that. So basically what has happened is we need to log in first of all, then we need to publish. So let's go ahead and add that into our pipeline. So what I've done is I've essentially logged into npm first, like this. Then what we need to do is once we've logged in, then we can publish to npm. So this is all using the npm token that we defined earlier on. So now what I'll do is I will first of all commit my changes, and then I'll be right back once the build has complete. Right, so now the pipeline is complete. If we expand it, you can see here it says link code, run test, build, run release, and then publish to npm. So if we go into the publish to npm, what actually happens is first of all we log into npm, which is using the registry auth token and the npm token that we created, which is also in our Circle CI pipeline, and then we publish to npm. So now you can see the package is published. If we go into npm, you can see here now our package is published, and if you go into it, you can now see this is our package. So to install it, what we can do is copy this and then install it using npm install in another project. So that is how you would use Circle CI to be able to create and handle your automations. If we go back into the pipeline, you can see we have a load of steps that are being worked and configured in here. And then essentially what happens is the pipeline itself gets run, and then it does all of the jobs for you, so you don't have to manually do them yourself. So that is everything complete in our project. Anyways, hopefully you could create your own component libraries and upload them and share them on the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.